For 4 years, through hot summers, cold winters, and countless storms, a German shepherd sat in the same spot waiting. He never begged, he never sought shelter, he never left. People tried to help, but he refused to leave. He wasn't lost, he was searching. But looking for whom? And why did he refuse to move? Then, one morning, a video changed everything. A family who thought they had lost him forever saw the impossible. He never stopped waiting for them. The story begins on a cold morning, cold enough to penetrate clothes and seep into bones. A thin layer of fog covered the deserted highway, winding around cracks in the asphalt. Last night's rain puddles still glistened in the dim light, reflecting the silhouette of a lone figure, a German shepherd sitting motionless in front of an abandoned gas station. His fur was dull, dust-coated from years of exposure to the elements. His ears twitched at the distant sound of an approaching vehicle, but he didn't move. His gaze remained locked on the road, as if willing something or someone to appear. Day after day, season after season, he had waited. Scorching summers, brutal winters, raging storms, none of it had driven him away. No collar, no leash, no owner. Just a dog, waiting for someone who never came back. People in town had stopped questioning his presence long ago. At first, there had been curiosity where he'd come from. Was he lost? Abandoned? But as weeks turned into months, and months stretched into years, he became a fixture, a silent guardian of the empty gas station. Truckers passing through noticed him. Some left scraps of food by the rusted pumps. Commuters on their daily drives slowed down to glance at him, wondering about the quiet mystery sitting by the roadside. He never begged, never approached, never barked. Locals tried to help. Someone had once left a blanket near where he slept, but by morning, it was untouched. A few had attempted to coax him into their cars, but he refused. He would step back, watch them, then return to his spot as if tethered to that patch of ground. He ate only when no one was watching, drank from puddles after the rain. He survived, but he never truly lived. He wasn't just a stray, he was waiting. And that was far worse. Martha Brooks, owner of the town's only diner, had been one of the first to notice him. At 56, she had seen her fair share of strays wandering through. But none like this one. Every morning, before unlocking the diner doors, she would drive past the gas station and leave a bowl of food near the old fuel pumps. She never got too close, never tried to touch him. She knew better than to scare off something so fragile. She had named him Cooper. It didn't feel right for him to be nameless. Poor thing, she would murmur whenever someone asked about him. He's waiting for someone. I don't know who, but I hope they come back. 4 years had passed, and still, the same quiet ritual continued. Martha leaving food, Cooper watching the road. Not everyone was content to let Cooper remain a ghost of the past. One trucker, a burly man named Pete, had once tried luring him into his rig with fresh steak. He left the door open, stepped back, gave Cooper space. But as soon as the shepherd sensed the attempt, he backed away, ears flat. He stood there, watching Pete with wary eyes, then turned and walked a few feet further down the lot before sitting again. A young woman named Claire had brought a leash, thinking she could gently lead him away. She spoke softly, offered treats, gave him time to trust her. Cooper let her get close enough to slip the leash around his neck, but the moment he felt the restraint, panic flashed in his eyes. He twisted, yanked free, and bolted. When he stopped, he was sitting exactly where he had started. No one tried again after that. It was heartbreaking, watching a dog choose loneliness over kindness. Why was he waiting? Had his owner abandoned him? Had something happened to the person he was looking for? There were no answers, only the silent figure sitting by the road, his patience unshaken, his resolve unbroken. The townspeople accepted it, even if they didn't understand it. Cooper became part of the town's landscape, as much a landmark as the rusting gas station behind him. But everything changed on an autumn morning when a stranger drove into town. Unlike the others, he didn't just glance at the dog and move on. He stopped. He watched. And something in his gut told him this wasn't just a stray dog. This was a story waiting to be uncovered. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same. Noah Parker had spent years chasing stories. Not the kind that made headlines, but the ones that mattered, the ones about people, about survival, about the quiet resilience of those the world often overlooked. He had covered lost hikers miraculously found, long-separated families reuniting, and even the occasional pet making its way back home after years of absence. But this was different. He had passed through this small town more times than he could count, always heading somewhere else, always on his way to the next assignment. The gas station, the winding road, the diner, they were familiar in the way that places you barely register tend to be. But today, for the first time, he saw the dog, a German shepherd, sitting stiffly in front of the abandoned gas station. eyes locked onto the road as if expecting something to materialize from the distance. The posture, the stillness, it was unnerving. It wasn't the look of a lost animal scavenging for food. It was something else entirely. Noah slowed his car, watching for a few moments. The dog didn't move. Curiosity tugged at him. He pulled into the diner's parking lot, shut off the engine, and stepped inside. The scent of coffee and bacon lingered in the air as Noah made his way to the counter. A few regulars sat at their usual spots, murmuring about the incoming cold front. Martha Brooks stood behind the counter, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She glanced up as he slid onto a stool. "Coffee?" He nodded. "And a question." She smirked knowingly as she poured his cup. "You're gonna ask about the dog, aren't you?" That caught him off guard. He leaned in slightly. "So it's not just me." Martha let out a short chuckle. "Honey, you're about 4 years late to that mystery." 4 years. Noah frowned. He had expected maybe a few months, some poor dog left behind, too stubborn to move on. But 4 years? That changed everything. Martha set the coffee down in front of him and leaned against the counter. "He's been out there every single day. Doesn't matter if it's freezing, pouring, or blazing hot. He won't leave." "Whose dog was he?" Noah asked. Martha sighed. "That's the thing. No one really knows." A few other voices chimed in from around the diner. Some say he belonged to a trucker who used to stop here. Others think he got lost and just never figured his way home. Martha shook her head. "I don't buy it. A stray doesn't sit in the same spot for 4 years waiting for nothing. He's waiting for someone." Noah took a slow sip of his coffee, his mind racing. He had written stories about animals with extraordinary loyalty before: dogs waiting at train stations, cats traveling miles back home. But this was something else entirely. He needed to know more. Noah spent the next hour talking to anyone who had ever taken notice of the shepherd. Most didn't have much to add beyond what he already knew. But then, a trucker sitting at the end of the counter spoke up. "I remember seeing that dog the night everything changed." Noah turned sharply. "What do you mean?" The man rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. 4 years ago, middle of a nasty storm, I was driving through town late at night. Saw a bad wreck not far from here. A car flipped over. Emergency crews everywhere." Noah leaned in, every muscle in his body tensed. "The thing is," the trucker continued, "as I was driving past, I saw a dog look just like that one running along the side of the road, chasing after one of the ambulances." Noah's pulse quickened. "You're sure it was the same dog?" The man nodded. "Same build, same color, looked terrified. I thought he was just another stray at first, but now, I don't think he ever stopped looking for whoever was in that car." Something clicked in Noah's mind. A car crash. A dog running after an ambulance. A shepherd sitting in the same spot for 4 years, waiting. This wasn't just a lost dog. This was a dog that had lost someone. Noah pulled out his phone, his fingers moving instinctively as he typed into a search engine. He filtered through old news reports, looking for any mention of an accident near this town 4 years ago. It took time, but eventually, he found it. A collision on Highway 214. Severe weather. A family's car had gone off the road. The article didn't name the victims, only mentioned that they had survived and were transported to a nearby hospital. That wasn't enough. Switching tactics, Noah searched through lost pet reports from the same time frame. It was a long shot. Most people gave up after a few months, let alone 4 years. But then he found it. A missing dog report filed exactly 4 years ago. The details matched perfectly. German Shepherd. Male. Last seen near accident site. Answers to the name Max. The listed owners? The Carter family. Noah exhaled sharply, his heart pounding. The dog waiting by the gas station wasn't just a stray. He had a name. And somewhere out there, his family had no idea he was still waiting for them. Noah sat back in his chair, gripping his phone tightly. This wasn't just another feel-good piece. This was something bigger. Max had survived on his own for 4 years, clinging to the only place that felt familiar, refusing to move on. And all this time, the Carter family had likely assumed he was dead. The question was, were they still out there? And if they were, would Max finally get the miracle he had been waiting for? 4 years ago, before Max became a ghost of the past, he had a home. He wasn't a stray. He wasn't lost. He was loved. Lucas Carter was only 10 years old when Max entered his life. From the moment his parents brought the tiny German Shepherd puppy home, Lucas and Max had been inseparable. They did everything together, running through the backyard, playing fetch until sunset, sneaking into the kitchen late at night for extra treats. Max slept at the foot of Lucas's bed, his soft breathing a constant, comforting presence. Every morning, before the school bus arrived, Lucas would kneel beside him and whisper, "You'll wait for me, right?" And every afternoon, Max would be there at the front door, tail wagging, eyes bright with excitement. To Lucas, Max wasn't just a pet. He was his best friend. On quiet nights, when the world outside was silent, Lucas would curl up beside Max and whisper, "You'll always stay with me, won't you?" And Max, with his unwavering loyalty, would press his nose against the boy's hand, as if to promise, always. But some promises, no matter how deeply meant, can't withstand fate. The rain had started as a drizzle, the kind that tapped lightly against the car windows, turning the world outside into a blur of shifting lights. The Carter family, Emily, Benjamin, Lucas, and Max, was on their way home from visiting Emily's parents. The drive was familiar, routine. The road stretched long and empty ahead of them, nothing but the distant glow of headlights cutting through the darkness. Lucas sat in the back seat, Max curled up beside him, his head resting on the boy's lap. The rhythmic hum of the tires, the steady patter of rain, it was peaceful. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A pair of headlights appeared out of nowhere, too close, too fast. Emily barely had time to gasp before the impact hit. Metal screeched. Glass shattered. The world flipped. For a moment, there was nothing but chaos. Lucas's scream, the deafening crash, the sickening sensation of being thrown. Then silence. The car had landed on its side, the front end crushed beyond recognition. The rain poured harder now, hammering against twisted metal. The scent of gasoline mixed with the sharp sting of smoke. Max's body ached, his ears ringing from the impact. He forced himself up, dazed, disoriented. His senses were overwhelmed. Smoke, rain, the muffled voices of strangers shouting in the distance. Then he heard it. A voice. Not just any voice. Lucas. Somewhere beyond the wreckage, Max saw figures moving. Paramedics. Firefighters. A pair of arms reaching into the mangled car, pulling Lucas free. The boy's face was pale, his body limp. Max barked, his heart pounding. He tried to scramble toward Lucas, but rough hands grabbed him, holding him back. "No! The dog! Someone get the dog!" a voice called. Max thrashed, panic surging through him. His boy, his Lucas, was being taken away. He had to go with him. He had to stay. Then came another voice, someone shouting over the storm, urgent, commanding. "Get him out of here before he gets hurt." And just like that, Max was yanked away. The world was spinning, blurred by rain and flashing emergency lights. The scent of burning rubber filled his nose. His paws scraped against wet pavement as he twisted, yanked, broke free. And then he ran. The rain lashed against Max's fur as he bolted down the road, chasing after the flashing red lights in the distance. The sirens wailed, growing fainter with every second. He ran until his legs burned, until his breath came in ragged gasps. But the ambulance never stopped. He had lost them. Max slowed, his paws splashing through puddles, his chest rising and falling in quick, desperate breaths. He turned in circles, ears pinned back, trying to catch Lucas's scent through the storm. But the rain had washed everything away. He barked once, twice, his voice swallowed by the howling wind. No answer. No Lucas. For the first time in his life, Max was alone. Drenched and exhausted, Max wandered through the dark, aimless, searching. He didn't know how much time had passed. Hours? A day? Then, in the distance, a flickering neon light. The gas station. It wasn't home, but it was close. He had been here before so many times. The scent was familiar, the shape of the building burned into his memory. And so, with nowhere else to go, he stopped. He sat down. And he waited. The first night, he stayed by the side of the road, eyes locked on the highway. The second night, he curled up against the wall of the gas station, shivering as the cold wind cut through his damp fur. The third night, someone left a piece of bread near the pumps. He didn't eat it. Not yet. Not until the next night, when his stomach ached too much to ignore. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. People tried to help. Some left food, some called out to him. But Max never left his spot for long. He never let anyone take him. Because deep down, he believed that if he waited long enough, Lucas would come back. 4 years later, he was still waiting. Far away, Noah Parker sat in his car, scrolling through his phone, staring at the missing dog report from 4 years ago. Max wasn't just any dog. He had a name. He had a family. And he had never stopped waiting for them. Noah's heart pounded as he read over the report again, every detail matching perfectly. The accident. The location. The timing. The pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place. But the real question remained, would Max ever see his family again? Noah Parker had written dozens of stories about lost pets, unlikely reunions, and the unwavering loyalty of animals. But this time, he wasn't just writing a story, he was living it. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing. 4 years. That dog had been sitting in the same place for 4 years. The thought was overwhelming. Max had never stopped waiting. Noah exhaled sharply, then grabbed his camera from the passenger seat. If this story wasn't worth telling, nothing was. Noah parked at a distance, careful not to startle Max. The soft evening light bathed the gas station in golden hues, highlighting the dust in the air, the cracked pavement, the unmoving figure of the dog who had refused to give up. He hit record. This is Max. For 4 years, he has been waiting. He zoomed in, capturing the quiet intensity in the shepherd's eyes. The way his ears twitched at passing cars. The way his posture never wavered. No one knows exactly how he survived, but every single day, he sits in this spot, staring at the same road, waiting for someone who never came back. Noah paused, swallowing hard. He had told hundreds of stories, but this one felt different. People have tried to help him. They've tried to take him in, to feed him, to give him a new home. But he refuses to leave. Because he's waiting for someone. The camera lingered on Max's still form, the weight of his loyalty pressing down on anyone watching. 4 years ago, Max was in a car accident with his family. They thought they lost him forever. And what they never knew is that he never stopped waiting for them. Noah took a breath, letting the silence settle. Then he ended the recording and immediately uploaded the video. The caption was simple. This dog has been waiting in the same place for 4 years. His family thought he was gone. Can we find them? Then, he waited. But he didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, the video had over 10,000 views. Within 3 hours, it had tripled. The comments section exploded. This is breaking my heart. Someone please find his family. Dogs don't deserve this kind of pain. Tell me he gets his happy ending. But not all reactions were positive. Some skeptics called it fake. Come on, this is just another viral sob story. There's no way a dog sat in one spot for 4 years. Not possible. People will believe anything on the internet. And then, something Noah had not anticipated happened. A woman commented, "I think that's my dog." It wasn't Emily Carter. It wasn't anyone who actually knew Max. But she was sure the dog in the video was hers. "I lost my shepherd a few years ago," she wrote. "He looks just like Max. I think it's him." The comment gained traction. People started tagging Noah, asking if he had confirmed the real owners. Doubt crept in. Had he made a mistake? Had he given people false hope? Noah ran a hand through his hair, staring at his phone screen. He had checked the missing pet report. The details matched perfectly. But what if this woman was telling the truth? He hesitated. Then, his phone buzzed. A direct message. He clicked on it. And his heart nearly stopped. Across the country, in a quiet suburban home, Lucas Carter scrolled through his phone, unaware that his entire world was about to change. A friend had sent him the video. "Dude, is this Max?" At first, he thought it was a joke. Then, he clicked play. The screen filled with an image that stole the breath from his lungs. A dog sitting by the road. His fur was worn, his eyes tired, but Lucas knew that face. He had spent every night for years dreaming of that face. His hands shook as he gripped his phone tighter. His chest felt like it had caved in. Then he heard the words. 4 years ago, Max was in a car accident with his family. They thought they lost him forever. Lucas couldn't breathe. Tears burned his eyes. His throat closed up. Then, in a burst of panic and hope, he bolted from his room. Emily Carter was in the kitchen when she heard the footsteps. Then, "Mom." She turned just in time to see her son burst into the room, holding his phone out like a lifeline. His face was pale, his expression a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. "Mom," he gasped, his voice breaking. "I think they found Max." Emily frowned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Lucas, slow down." "What?" But he wasn't listening. He shoved the phone toward her. "Look. Just look." She hesitated, then she saw the screen. A dog, sitting in front of a gas station. The caption below sent a shockwave through her entire body. "This dog has been waiting in the same place for 4 years. His family thought he was gone. Can we find them?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her hand covered her mouth as she watched the video, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. 4 years. 4 years believing Max was gone. And all this time he had been waiting. Tears blurred her vision. She barely heard Lucas whisper, "It's him, isn't it?" She couldn't speak. She could only nod. Noah's phone vibrated again. He opened his inbox. A new message. It was from Emily Carter. "That's our dog. That's Max. We thought he was gone forever. Please tell me he's still there." Noah stared at the screen, his pulse hammering in his ears. This was it. The miracle Max had been waiting for. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, he started typing. "Emily, Max is still here. He never left." And miles away, as the Carter family scrambled to pack their bags, Max sat in the same place he had for 4 years, completely unaware that everything was about to change. The road stretched endlessly before them, a dark ribbon illuminated only by the headlights cutting through the early morning fog. Inside the car, the Carter family sat in tense silence, the weight of the past pressing down on them. Emily gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Benjamin sat beside her, his hands clenched into fists. And in the back seat, Lucas Carter barely blinked, his phone clutched tightly in his hands. The video of Max playing on repeat. 10 hours. That was how long it took to get there. 10 hours of wondering. 10 hours of hoping. 10 hours of fearing that somehow, some way, this was all a mistake. But now, as their car pulled into the gas station's gravel lot, reality hit them all at once. He was there, sitting exactly where he had been in the video. 4 years. And he hadn't moved. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. It was really him. Emily was the first to step out. She barely felt the cold morning air as she scanned the lot, her eyes immediately locking onto the familiar figure near the gas pumps. Benjamin followed, his jaw set, his breath unsteady. Lucas was the last. He hesitated, gripping the car door as if afraid that the moment he moved, everything would disappear. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. Max was still. His ears twitched, his nose lifted slightly to the air. He sensed something was different. But he didn't move. Did he recognize them? Did he even remember? Lucas swallowed hard, his heart hammering. Max? His voice was barely above a whisper. No reaction. Lucas tried again, stepping closer. Max. It's me. The shepherd's eyes flicked toward him, but there was hesitation. A wariness that hadn't been there before. 4 years was a long time. Lucas's chest tightened. The fear he had buried deep inside started creeping up. What if Max had waited all this time, only to forget them? Tears blurred his vision. Then, through the lump in his throat, he whispered something only Max would understand. Max. His voice cracked. Do you remember our game? Under the oak tree? The reaction was instantaneous. Max's entire body tensed. His ears perked forward. His eyes, once cautious, distant, suddenly came alive. A flicker of recognition. A hesitation. Then, like a dam breaking, he moved. At first, just a step. Then another. Then, suddenly, he was running. Lucas barely had time to brace himself before Max collided into him, knocking him backward onto the gravel. The boy let out a choked laugh, wrapping his arms around the dog as Max buried his face into his chest, whining, pressing closer as if trying to prove to himself that this was real. Lucas clung to him, tears streaming down his face. You waited. You actually waited. Max whimpered, his tail wagging furiously, his body trembling not with fear, but with relief. Benjamin knelt beside them, his hands gripping Max's fur. His strong, stoic facade crumbled as he whispered, Good boy, good boy. Emily sank to her knees, covering her mouth, sobbing. The dog they had thought they lost forever had never stopped waiting for them. The drive back was silent, but it wasn't the same kind of silence they had experienced before. This wasn't a silence of doubt, of fear. It was a silence of peace. In the back seat, Max lay curled against Lucas, his head resting on the boy's lap, his body finally at ease. Lucas ran his fingers gently through the shepherd's fur. Every few minutes, he would whisper, I missed you, buddy. Max never moved away, and that was enough. Because, finally, Max was going home. The Carter house was warm, welcoming, and filled with familiar voices. But for Max, it wasn't home. Not yet. He stood hesitantly in the doorway, his ears flicking at every small noise. The walls, the furniture, even the scent of his family, it was all different. The home he had once known was gone. Lucas knelt beside him, his voice soft. Come on, Max. It's okay, buddy. Max didn't move. His paws remained firmly planted on the threshold. His body was tense, muscles coiled as if waiting for something to go wrong. For 4 years, he had learned that the world outside was unpredictable, that humans could disappear, that home could vanish in an instant. And now, after all this time, he wasn't sure if he was allowed to stay. Lucas saw the hesitation in his eyes. He didn't push. Instead, he sat down on the floor, crossed his legs, and waited. Just like Max had waited for him. That first night, Max wouldn't go inside. Instead, he paced near the back door, ears twitching at every unfamiliar creak of the house. Every instinct told him to keep watch, to be ready to leave if he had to. Lucas tried everything. He laid out blankets, left food near his old bed, even slept on the floor beside him. But Max never settled. Every time someone moved, every time a door opened, his head would snap toward the sound like he was waiting for something to take this away from him. He still wasn't sure if he belonged. Emily and Benjamin watched with quiet worry. "He'll need time," Emily murmured. Benjamin nodded, watching the dog stand near the window, staring out at the yard. "He spent 4 years surviving. He doesn't know how to stop." Lucas refused to give up. He sat with Max for hours, sometimes in silence, sometimes whispering old memories, hoping one of them would be enough to make the shepherd believe that he was safe, that he was home. One morning, a week after Max had returned, Lucas woke up earlier than usual. He rubbed his eyes, stretched, and then, he froze. Max wasn't by the door, he wasn't pacing. He was curled up on his old dog bed. Lucas held his breath, afraid to move, afraid to break the fragile moment. Max's chest rose and fell steadily, his body finally relaxed, his guard down for the first time in years. Lucas's phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "Don't wake him. Let him feel safe." So Lucas just sat there, watching his best friend sleep in his home for the first time in 4 years. That night, Lucas lay on the couch, flipping through an old photo album. Pictures of Max as a puppy, of their adventures, of the life they had before the accident. Then movement. Lucas looked up. Max was standing beside him. Not by the door, not by the window. Right next to him. Lucas didn't move. He barely breathed. Then, slowly, carefully, Max rested his head on Lucas's lap. Lucas's throat tightened. His hand trembled as he reached out, running his fingers through Max's fur. "You remember me, don't you?" he whispered. Max let out a soft sigh. And then, for the first time since coming home, he wagged his tail. The days that followed were different. Max started following Lucas around the house again, just like he used to. He wagged his tail more. He let Emily pet him without flinching. He learned that doors opening didn't mean someone was leaving forever. He learned that food wasn't something he had to wait for in the cold. But most importantly, he learned that he didn't have to wait anymore. One afternoon, Lucas walked into the backyard and whistled. Max, who had been lying in the grass, lifted his head immediately. Lucas grinned. "Come on, boy. Let's play." For a brief second, there was hesitation. Then, Max stood. He ran. Not toward the road. Not toward the past. Toward Lucas. That night, as the Carter family sat in the living room, Max curled up on the rug at their feet. Lucas reached down, fingers threading through his fur. Max sighed contently, shifting closer. Lucas smiled. "Good night, buddy." Max's eyes fluttered shut. No longer waiting, no longer searching. For the first time in 4 years, he was home. For 4 long years, Max waited. Through storms, through loneliness, through the endless uncertainty of whether his family would ever return. He never gave up. He never stopped believing. And in the end, his faith was not in vain. This story isn't just about a dog who found his way home. It's about loyalty, about the unbreakable bond between a pet and the people who love him. Max's journey proves that hope, no matter how distant, is never wasted. But here's something to think about. How many other pets are still out there, waiting? How many never get the miracle Max did? If this story touched your heart, help spread its message. Share, and subscribe to the channel so more people hear stories like Max's. And if you ever see a dog waiting by the road, maybe just maybe they're waiting for someone who still loves them.